Where my orders?
Welcome everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm just going to put on my video. Now, can the panelists see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And I presume the attendees can as well. So I have one attendee with their hand up. I'm just going to check who that is. Okay, great, thank you. Um, so let me just check that I have one attendee who Kiva, I'm going to ask you to talk if that's okay, because I just want to check why your hand is up. Would you like to ask a question, Kiva?
No, I don't need to ask a question. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
I'll
Okay,
lower
thank
my
you.
hand. Thank
Well,
you.
hopefully I'll have questions as we go along, Kiva. I'll mute you again.
No
Thank you.
problem.
So just for the attendees know that the chat is disabled today because this is a webinar. So we'll ask you to put your questions in the Q&A, and then we'll answer the questions as we go along in the Q&A, but we'll also address them in the fireside chat at the end. So you're very welcome to our webinar today on building a digital health product that addresses customer needs. We're very happy to have Gavin O'Duffy and Lauren Byrne with us today to discuss this very important topic. We indeed connect, as you will know from working with us and from the slides that you have watched as the video started, that we support digital health startups and SMEs in developing their products, and this is always key to what we do and what you do to make sure that the product actually addresses a pertinent need. As innovators, we always have to avoid the risk of developing a product that we think is a good idea and that we have fallen in love with without asking our customers if they are as convinced as we are that it is a good idea. And almost without exception, when we talk to our customers, they ask us to tweak the product. So this is always an iterative process, and it's one that as innovators we have to embrace, because they're not telling us that they don't like our product. They're simply asking us to tweak it and telling us that they would like it better if it contains some amendments that suit their needs better. So I'm going to hand over to Gavin Duffy, who is a product strategy consultant and has worked with quite a few of the big techs. He's going to tell us which ones and talk us through some of the product development processes that he has used in those organizations. Just before we start, folks, I'm just going to tell you that we're going to finish today at 1 o'clock on the dot, because DKIT, where we're based, is observing 1 minute silence for the tragedy in Creeslough at 1 o'clock. So you're welcome to stay with us for 1 minute if you wish to observe a minute's silence. Okay, thank you. And I am going to now pass you over to Gavin O'Duffy. Thank you, Gavin.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. So I want to begin by saying I'm very glad to virtually meet you. And if after this talk, anybody has further questions we don't have time for, please let me know, and I will be happy to take questions. So my background spans from companies with 3 employees. Actually, right now, I'm working with a company with just 2, but all the way to a company with 1 million, which is Amazon. And in that, I've experienced over the 25 years of work experience in sectors as diverse as automotive, telecoms, and consumers, and healthcare. There are some common threads that I have observed that really stand out as helping a company develop the right products. And developing the right products sounds so simple, but it really is a challenge. And fundamentally, most businesses fail because they don't develop the right products. Now, there are other reasons, and perhaps it's to do with supply chain, perhaps it's to do with macroeconomic factors. Obviously wars and viruses massively play a part in business success. But excluding that, ultimately the product market fit, is the area where, arguably the innovator, the leader, the entrepreneur has the most control. And it's therefore vital that you do all in your power to try and make sure you're building the right product. And I'll share with you some learnings There's a very nice slide deck that I used when I was at Amazon, which I was up to a year ago. And I think it speaks to these sort of philosophical points. I will focus on how they can be applied to smaller companies, to SMEs and startups, because there's no point telling you what will work for a company with hundreds of millions of dollars of research budget. So, rest assured, what I tell you, I would say sincerely will work at the small scale as well as the big scale. As for my background, I'm an engineer by training. I grew up in Dublin. I worked in the UK, Australia, and the United States. I was in Silicon Valley for about 15 years. I worked with companies larger companies like Ericsson, Microsoft, and Amazon. I've also worked for consulting companies and startups. And currently, I advise Irish healthcare startups and based in Dublin. So the particular focus for this talk is the healthcare sector, where I've been focused the last couple of years. And, it's been very interesting to me, where I see, better now for being immersed in the last couple of years, deeply in it, the challenges of developing a healthcare product. So, Amazon's philosophy is we start with the customer and we work backwards. And, it's a lot easier when the customer, when you're supplying them books, which is where Amazon got its start. The key differentiator that Amazon started with was to offer any book in the world on the basis that when you go into a bookshop, you can only get what is available in stock or through their supply chain. And Amazon decided also on books because in order to build trust, people, were getting used to the internet, but certain things wouldn't sell well on the internet, and if people were to try and pick out clothing, for example, there's a lot of elements with clothing that are tactile, that are maybe depending on the lighting conditions. So seeing a photograph of a sweater or a dress, it may not be enough to convince somebody to buy. So books are different. They're very tangible. So Amazon started small, but the ambition was always to become a one-stop shop for all the needs of a household. And it was the initial start. There wasn't even a thought about AWS. That came later. But then starting with the customer. Now in healthcare, it's complex. You may start with a mission to save lives, a mission to reduce pain, a mission to reduce frustration, provide support, very noble aims. And that's why I'm involved in healthcare, because it is noble, it is important. But as probably most of you figured out, selling a product at scale in the healthcare system means your customer might be a hospital, it might be a doctor's office, it might be have likely hurdles for regulatory approval. So part of the challenge there is to identify who is your customer. The idea of focusing on the customer is not new, but I will show you now shortly an approach that I feel works well regardless of scale. And it's all about being accurate about who your customer truly is. You might visualize the customer being the elderly person living alone in the community, who's cut off and isolated, and you may have a digital therapeutic, or you may have a new app, or you may have a machine that could help their lives. But because it's medical information, there's a regulatory component to getting approval. And because the public healthcare system is not direct to consumer in most cases, you may have to sell into the HSE. So I'm not going to go into the particulars of procurement with the HSE, but like I said, the important thing is you're very clear-eyed about your customer, and in a B2C scenario, it's important to realize while the product will focus on solving an end user need, they may not be the one making the purchasing decision, and therefore you really have to understand what your product does for the person who's making that decision. So the innovation culture is all about obsessing over the customer, and part of that strength with Amazon is the entire focus of the company is external. I've seen other companies where they're very excited about the technology, they put the CTO and the top engineer on a high pedestal, and they maybe even recruit a top engineer by saying, you're going to be the king here. We know you're a genius, and we want you to join us because you're going to be given a playground to show how, to use your technical skills to build on this mission. And that's a danger. I'll be honest, it's a danger. When people come into a company thinking they have a free rein, and when they are a purely technical person, you're creating a very, very problematic scenario when you might know and I'm assuming that most of the people on the call here are the people who are maybe driving the vision of the company. That maybe what's needed is not so technical. Maybe we need to start with a simpler product that is less risky. Maybe we need to outsource the software development to a company who's been down through medical software development. And suddenly you've got a principal engineer on your team who's been asked to manage outsourcing the work. So when you're creating a business and you're hiring and you're thinking about it, you have to make sure that the focus is on addressing the external need. Otherwise, you're having competing needs internally with the aspirations, the career aspirations, the technical goals, the areas where the people coming into the company maybe thought they were going to be working on. Because one thing's for sure, if you don't pivot as you learn about the customer needs and you don't obsess on doing the right thing for the customer, you're risking your business. So you might start with an outsource it all mentality, and then you run into trouble with the quality of suppliers, and then you decide to bring the engineering in-house. But then, in practical terms, most people have to get that balance of bringing in tools. You may have to comply with, an EHR that requires conformance, and you have to spend half your engineering budget on security testing, which can be frustrating when your engineer tells you it's all stupid anyway, because, it's he believes there's no risk, and he or she believes there's no risk. So this is just an example of where I would strongly suggest that when you think about what you're building and how you're going to approach it, you hire the people who are flexible, because flexibility is the key. The next thing, that's a reference to the original mission statement of Amazon. The next thing I would say is that you can attract people by transforming lives. Especially in healthcare, you don't necessarily need to have all the proven data that a business model is tried and tested. To be innovative, you often have to take a risk. But if you have fellow travelers on your team, people who understand that you want to improve lives, you want to make the world a better place, and they can be flexible and combine that creativity, their creativity, whether in marketing, product management, program management, even regulatory approval, creativity, seeing around corners, unblocking obstacles. That's the type of DNA you want in a company. Obviously, there's large, and for good reason, good guardrails with regulatory approval. But even still, that creativity of spirit is needed because you're going to have limited resources, and it's a competitive market, and speed matters. But mostly probably financially, you can't afford maybe to have as many specialists, and you want people who are creative, who can wear several hats. Just to said, this is the title, Putting the Customer First, Innovating the Amazon Way. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Now, I strongly recommend you do this several times over. You do it put yourself in the shoes of a regulator, an approver, somebody who's approving a product. What risks would they see? What would they imagine could go wrong if your product, your software, your hardware goes wrong? Spend time in their shoes. Do a brainstorming session. Imagine what it's like to be a regulator. Maybe talk to somebody who's a regulatory consultant. Really get into the mind. While the people in that organization are sometimes just a barrier to your success, you will have more luck with them if you really empathize. Typically, the kind of person who works in a regulator is a person who's very sincere, generally risk averse, people who like to do things correctly and concerned about things that are novel and new if they don't understand them. So to get a good relationship with a regulator, you have to be prepared to document what you're doing and what safeguards you're applying. The next customer might be the HSE procurement manager. he or she is going to have to understand what he's getting for the money, what is the return on investment. But more importantly, how does it work with the existing systems that he or she may have previously approved? If you go in and saying, we're going to take out the crap you have in your system and replace it with our brilliant shining diamonds, you may be insulting them because they may have approved that, inverted commas, crap. And so you have to be respectful for what's gone before. And you think about a procurement manager needs to be able to explain to their manager why they said yes to your decision, or why they would recommend HSE approves your product. And the obvious one, of course, is the end user. And I think most of you probably do think about the end user, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time about that. But it's important to understand that you're honest about the end user. They might have the pain they experience, maybe pain they would rather live with than learn to install, Windows on a laptop and download an application through the marketplace. Maybe that pain is actually worse than the chronic back pain they've got, because technically these steps for some people, really make them feel stupid, make them feel disempowered, make them feel lost. And so you've got to understand that the market, if your customer is not tech savvy, you need to solve that problem for them. You can't expect them to solve it for you. So a practical technique here is to write an imaginary press release. Write down to the language that you see in other companies' press releases. Take the time, imagine your success. Imagine 12 months from now, you're launching your product. What would the head of the HSE say? What would the regulator say? Imagine, generate quotes that you would love them to say. Not that the regulator typically comments on press releases, but imagine a range of people in your approval chain. It could be one of your board members. It could be a partner if you're partnering with VHI. Imagine what the head of VHI innovation might say to your product. Think of all the angles, and live in that space, hang out in that space for a while. Sometimes in writing that, you realize you're talking about your technology, but the benefits are not, they're not coming out as easily. And that could be a red flag where you're excited about a technology, you want to do blockchain or you want to do AI, but the benefit, either requires the user to jump through a bunch of hurdles. There's some products will be targeted at specialists and they'll get training. There's a huge difference there in your approach than if it's a product for the mass market. Think about the user manual. If you start with a user manual written in plain English for a non-technical person, it may help you decide that there's no way you could ask a person to do a 6-stage installation process. You have to solve that problem first, and that maybe is a different partner you work with because maybe they're a little more expensive or they're overseas, but maybe their product is easier to install. It's a platform for installing your product. So don't overlook that. And then the FAQ, if somebody's using your product, what's the likely pain points they might suffer? And you can do some surveys, and even a small sample size, 5 or 10 people, completely outside your company with no bias and no prior understanding of how the product works. Ask them what questions they would have and get that down. Capture these as collateral for your product management team. I can't emphasize, I've seen documents that have been revised 30 times at this stage to get the narrative right about what they're building, why they're building it, what need they're addressing, who the customer is, why they believe this is a worthy need and a long-term need. And really, compared to the cost of tooling and software development, this is really just framing the narrative of what you're building and why you're building it. And that getting that right is something I can't emphasize enough, is where the failure of many companies can be traced to the assumptions they made at the early stage about the market size, the appetite of the market for change, the appetite of the procurement body for the product, even though it's obvious to you it would save them money. And maybe the ROI didn't fit their budget cycle. So maybe the ROI is in 5 years, but they only have a 3-year budget cycle, things like that. So, that's this quote from Jeff Bezos is all about not just diving in and building and then figuring out what happens next. It's really, working with the press release and starting there. You do have to think long term. You want to build a business. I think, you know, you have the key thing here is flexible on the details. So if you know you want to build something, you know, think about carefully that kind of people you bring into your team and yourself and your own thinking. You're not you know, trying to find a solution for the product you've got in your mind because you want to build that product because your CTO says they're very excited to build that product and he or she's a great person. Think about being flexible. Simple thing, you're making customers' lives easier. It's, you know, that's got, you know, if you make it's easier in the long run, but it's a lot of friction at the opening stage, installing the product, learning how to use it. You know, that's a bit of a red flag for me. I won't go into that, but obviously Amazon proved, you know, it could generate a side business from AWS after getting a successful retail business. Willing to fail, I think we all know about this, and nobody around this table, I'm sure, is in the safest possible path. You know, they could have, I'm sure all of you could be working very safely, you know, in larger companies that maybe have less upside but less downside. So I think you already have that. You know, being willing to fail, you know, is part of Amazon's DNA. It can be part of yours too, is embracing the fact that you're taking a risk. But the key thing is failing fast. Don't fail after spending, you know, 6 man-months of software development, which is why I'm really beating the drum for the deep thinking at the beginning about the right product. 2 examples that Amazon failed. Amazon Auctions was a site that was promoted heavily, but ultimately didn't succeed. It was going head-to-head with eBay. That just did not work. The one on the right, I was personally involved for 3 years. Some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, dedicated. We worked day and night, weekends, traveled to China, worked with supply chain issues, worked with design issues, patent issues. Jeff Bezos was personally directing this product. What could go wrong? You know, one of the greatest innovators in the world as a pet product, and, you know, doesn't he know what the customers, you know, will buy? And certainly it hired a talented team. That photograph on the right is from the launch. I didn't take that picture, but I was standing next to the photographer. The phone flopped. The phone was a complete flop, and it's now one of Amazon's most kind of noted failures. Now, 2 things about that. One is Amazon was able to absorb the loss. He was able to tell us, the people who worked on the product, that we could be welcome to stay around and find another project to work on because we demonstrated, you know, that we could deliver. Now, unfortunately, we deliver the wrong thing. Some of you may be familiar with this. I'll say briefly, the reasons probably are numerous, but the key one I would say is that from the time the product was conceived to launch was about 3 years, and things changed in those 3 years. In those 3 years, phones developed from having lots of features to really built in to having an app store. The key thing was the app store. What apps can you get on a phone? We take it for granted today, but the early smartphones, most of the goodness was baked into it, and what you got out of the box was why you bought the phone for what's built in. So in those 3 years, Google and Apple had launched app stores that were essentially the best in the world. And when Amazon launched its phone, it had its own app store, which was almost as good, but not quite good enough. Also, while we knew that there was a lot of great features on this phone, the people in the shops, the phones in America, particularly where we launched, the people in the shops who sold that phone didn't really understand the value of those features. And they were directing people to buy Apple or Samsung, Android products because they were safer bets. So in hindsight, we should have done more work to think about the people who would be our agent, be our ambassadors. We weren't, you know, you could buy the phone on the website, but a lot of the sales of phones was done through AT&T and Verizon, and those offered, you know, payment plans. So most people bought their phones with these payment plans tied into contracts, and so you needed the people in the shops to know why they should buy a Fire phone from Amazon. So, you know, even the big companies get it wrong, but you know, despite good executing the product, delivering on time, you know, on budget, etc., the product had missed the mark. And frankly, you know, 6 months before launch, we probably should have pulled the plug and not launched it and pivoted, tried to strike a deal with Apple or Google to get on their ecosystem, because they had, you know, we had to be honest, they had kind of won that battle. And there's a nice, thing about Amazon. We don't care if other people see the value in it. Being willing to be misunderstood. That's really to give you comfort. If you're really passionate about something and you think there's an unmet need, unmet needs, sometimes they exist because the technology is not there, but sometimes people just tolerate it. I mean, think about taxis. Nobody would have thought in, 2005 that fundamentally taxis, were a flawed and limited service. And people accepted them. They've been around for 100 years. And Uber comes along and suddenly, the whole experience for the customer changes, and frankly, the experience for the taxi companies changes in a negative way. And a lot of money flows into Uber's pockets and away from small businesses. And that is the reality of kind of innovation. When it takes off, like Amazon did, like Uber did, it can really take off and be disruptive. But with that, new business opportunities arise, and we move forward. We don't have to. One thing Amazon never did was focus on trying to beat other companies. It was always focused on the customer. They'd be mindful of what competitors are doing, but never obsessed on that. An example of thinking long term is when the first Kindle came out, it was ugly, and it didn't sell a lot, but it provided user feedback. So if you have a product you can get it to the minimum lovable product. It doesn't have. We used to use the word minimum viable product, but that was problematic because sometimes when a product is viable, it means it basically works, and you still can fail to get enough traction because it's not lovable. So it had to have something charming. So the product on the left there is somewhat charming, but clunky, heavy, short battery life. But those are problems we could solve if we really knew the core concept of electronic book was good. So don't wait for the time and money to develop the product on the right. If the product on the left will get you in the market, get you feedback, if you can afford to build that cheaply, maybe white label existing hardware, and then iterate on that. So how do you get a culture of innovation? Key thing is mechanisms. You have to figure out in your conversations with your team, how are you operating? If all your meetings are very creative, but nobody writes anything down, then you can end up having a lot of ideas floating in the air, but everybody having their own flavor of it. So discipline around, capturing the ideas, capturing the owners of projects, owners of actions, putting in timeframes. It's these are sort of boring, but will make the difference between, in terms of the amount of speed you can operate on. I see this will pop up there. Is there a question? Yeah, I got 3 minutes left. Oh, perfect. So the next step here is in architecture. So this relates to just understanding what you're building, and how you plan to scale. So the architecture could be that you're going to build on an off-the-shelf platform and build applications that are bespoke. You might, the key thing is, if you focus on the customer, you're not going to be tied to one architecture. So early on, you do want flexibility. Probably best to do certain things well and buy in the other components, even if the margins are not great. But if you can build the differentiation part of your product yourself and leverage, Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud as examples. There's frameworks for app developers where you can kind of use kind of white label apps and customize. Focus on what you do and have an architecture that's flexible. One of the ways that Amazon worked is that they built these products where they didn't have to monitor and approve everything that people checked in. There was self-service. That's probably more relevant at scale, but it is ideally where the health system will go. There will be platform and app stores for health apps where people can go through an approval process with a third party, and then customers can access them like from a menu. With your culture, you have to hire the kind of people that are really excited about the mission and flexible about the details. So, don't overpromise your developers that they're going to have a free hand, and don't bring them in because you're building the technology that they're excited about. That only is applicable when you're more mature. You need people who understand it can't be about them. And then and get out of the way. Once you've set the parameters and you've given them direction, trust them. If you hire the right people, no matter where they're, remote or in the office, trust them, but obviously put in checks and balances. If somebody's running late, consistency, you have to hold them accountable. But we see a lot of people who are good at building don't like to be brought into a bright lit office and surrounded by a lot of perks and coffee breaks and lunch breaks. Many people do their best work at night, so be flexible there. But obviously, don't give them a free hand and bill you for 3 months and not produce anything. You've got to agree on at least weekly check-ins, and they need to have the responsibility to explain what they did and why the project is taking as long as it does. These these points here are what we call Amazon leadership principles. I think they're a good read. You can look them up online. These are kind of things that are part of Amazon's core culture. You can see here a lot of them. Some of them are self-evidence, but I would say the single most important one, if I picked one, is earning trust. If you don't trust your team, they don't trust you because of lack of transparency, or you don't actually spend enough time talking, that one can undermine the business. I've talked a lot about customer obsession, but hiring people who want to really take ownership for something and really are dedicated, that's the right DNA. That's the Amazon leadership principles. It's well worth a look. And Amazon succeeded with small teams. And so when I started with the Alexa team, I was able to hire 5 or 6 people just to get us started. We called it 2 pizza teams. That said, you should see what the size of pizzas are in America. But with a small team that's very tight, the type of team you can feed with 2 pizzas, you can really take on the world. So with that, I'll finish and say thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks very much for that, Gavin. I'm going to ask you, panel attendees, please to put your questions in the Q&A as we go along, and we'll take all the questions at the end. So before I hand over to Lauren now, I'm going to launch a poll because we would like to know where you are at with your product development. So first of all, I'm going to ask you, do you have process in place does your organization have a process in place to explore and identify your customer needs? So if you can just give me a yes, no, or somewhat on that, please. Okay, we're nearly at everyone. If anybody else wants to answer, I'll just give you another few seconds. Okay, so that's good news that everybody has some sort of a process in place. A lot of somewhats, which is entirely understandable in small business. Sometimes the process, you're also writing the process as you go along. It's good to have a process that a big company uses, just as Gavin has outlined for us through the AWS model. And did I share the results? Yeah. So now I'm just going to ask you, what are the obstacles in putting process in place? If you can just bear with me, I'll find the second question. Now I'm just going to launch this poll, and if you can tell me, what are the obstacles for you? Everyone has answered. If anybody else wants to join in, please do. I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, I'm just going to end the poll now and show you the results. So I suppose the results, unsurprisingly, are that budget is a huge constraint for a lot of companies. General resources, which includes all of the above, and access to customers can be particularly during COVID, was a very big obstacle because of the fact that we are dealing in healthcare and a lot of our customers are vulnerable people. So I'm going to hand over to Lauren now, and she's going to talk to us about how Isaac innovated during COVID, and how they developed their product based on customer needs. I'm just going to turn off cameras for Gavin and myself and hand over to Lauren. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Sarah. So just checking that you can all see my screen there, okay?
Yeah, we can, Lauren. Thanks.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for having me here today. I suppose just a quick introduction. So I am project manager for Isaac Care. And I suppose an outline of the presentation today, I'm going to take you through a little bit about what Isaac Care is and what we do, and then really focus on our development timeline. As Sarah mentioned, we did actually develop our product throughout COVID, but I think an awful lot of what Gavin was talking about really resonated with me when I was thinking back at our design process. So I suppose this is a practical example of what Gavin was speaking about in his presentation. So just quickly to introduce Isaac Care. So the word Isaac, it stands for independent support and ambient care. We have a vision to revolutionize the way people are cared for in their own homes with our unique blend of technology and care. Our services allows for effective and non-intrusive monitoring of a person's health and well-being 24/7. And our assistive technology allows us to provide care during the hours of the day when family members and care staff can't be present. We look at using assistive technology to support, augment, and improve human care. We come from a background of a home care company, and we really saw Isaac as a solution to a real need that we could see within our home care clients. So what we do is we provide the right care in the right place at the right time by leveraging assistive technology, sensors in the home, personal care, and 24/7 support. We can support people to live safely and independently in their own homes. We're not a technology company. We're born in response to a real need that we could see to provide additional support to our home care clients and their care networks. We could see a lot of people only had support for the hours of the day when a home care worker or family member were present with them. And for the other 23 hours of the day, there was relatively little support. We could see that technology was really underutilized in this sector and that it really had the potential to have a huge impact on people's lives. We've designed Isaac with a person-centered approach. And as you can see actually on my previous slide here, the person is at the center of everything that we do. We've designed our family caring app based on the principles of circles of care. So we allow data to be really easily shared among relevant groups of people. So what we could see is that a lot of our home care clients, you could see that one person was maybe taking on the majority of the care responsibilities, and the rest of the family felt like they didn't know what was going on. So they just let the other person keep doing what they were doing. And often that leads to one person feeling burnt out and the rest of the family not knowing how they can support. So by sharing information really easily and automatically through these circles of care, everyone is kept up to date and is updated on anything they need to address. So whether that be a fall alert, whether it's just peace of mind that there's no alerts at all, the data is really easy to share and it allows for really meaningful notifications. Like the whole premise of the app then is to keep people connected and to encourage easy sharing of information. So then we integrate with a range of really easy to use devices that are designed to ensure our clients are healthy and well, and that they can access help if they need it. We put a lot of work into figuring out the right devices. We had to make sure that they were very easy to use. And I'll talk a bit more about the process that we went through there. And these devices then communicate real-time relevant updates to circles of care within the app, providing peace of mind to all involved. And then this is all supported by our third pillar, our 24/7 wraparound support. We have someone on hand 24/7 to monitor fall alerts, and our clinical team remotely monitor health trends, allowing for a preventative and proactive approach to care. So families have peace of mind that there's someone clinical monitoring their loved ones' health over time. And for healthcare professionals, they know that there's someone monitoring and looking to see if there's an intervention needed on the first sign of deteriorating health all with the view to keeping people healthy and well at home, reducing hospitalizations and providing peace of mind to families. So taking a look then at our development timeline. So you can see it's been a long process. It was back in 2014 that we really recognized the need to integrate technology with care. So around that time, we were over at a Health Plus Care event in London, and they were talking about reducing the length of care visits from a half an hour to 15 minutes, all in the interest of efficiency and as a response to the capacity issues with staffing. We thought that's just not practical, and we started looking at technology to find a solution to this. We also, at the time, had a client who was receiving home care support 3 days a week. This client had a fall on a Friday, and they had no family support. So it was the Monday morning by the time their home care assistant found them at the bottom of the stairs. So both of these factors came together and really pushed a need that we could see to solve two problems. The first is for the person themselves, that they have that 24/7 support. There's someone always looking after them. And the second is increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of the care services that we provide. So in 2014, we joined an EU project called Vizier, and this project looked at a really person-centered approach to assistive technology and how that can be integrated into an older person's daily lives, looking at the struggles of changing interfaces between Google, and every website changes their interface quite often. So how we could import that information in a user-friendly way. And throughout that project, we learned a huge amount around person-centered design and user-friendliness. So from 2016 to 2020, we participated in that project, and we conducted our own internal R&D, which led to the first iteration of our app being released to Android and iOS stores in 2020. At the time, we didn't have any access to our clients, although we do have a client base of over 500 clients waiting for us. This is when the COVID pandemic hit, so we couldn't access them. But what we did do was roll out the app. There was no intervention needed there. People just downloaded the app. And at the time, it just had very basic features. And that was our circle of care messaging and our calendar management feature. Then throughout 2020 and 2021, we focused on what app features we could add that deliver values to our clients. And then 2021, we added in devices onto our platform. So this is when we started with our user trials. We conducted a very wide range of user trials, and we learned quite a lot from them. Something that Gavin mentioned is put yourself in the customer's shoes. So I think initially we thought these devices are really easy to take them out of the box and plug them in and get using them. But that wasn't us putting ourselves in the shoes of an older person who doesn't know how to use it. So devices were left in the box. So that was a big learning for us. And we changed our process completely. So we completely pre-configure everything before it's sent out. So it's ready to go straight out of the box with no interaction needed. Like our customers aren't particularly tech savvy, quite a lot of them. So we wanted to make sure that they understood that the devices were really easy to use. And we had to keep that in mind with everything that we were delivering. So then around, for the past year, we've been working on HSE projects, a launch into the UK market, and we're continuously developing new projects. So with the HSE projects, then we had to put ourselves in the shoes of the regulator and really the end customer, which was a very different perspective than we had done up to that date when we were putting ourselves in the shoes of our end user. So there was a lot of learning there. And throughout the year, we've really progressed our solution onto a stage where it's commercially viable. We have hundreds of happy customers at the minute throughout Ireland and the UK. You can see here from the B2C point of view, peace of mind is the one main aspect that we get from our customers. You can see people saying it's a relief, it's reassuring. That one of our clients had said he couldn't leave the house and was fearful of falling, that nobody would find them. But now Isaac has given them a new lease of life. And it's very reassuring to hear that we've done it right. We've got our first product out to market for B2C. And then I suppose on the B2B terms, we're working with a number of different organizations, as you can see here on this slide. So the two organizations in the very center, myhomecare.ie and Care 24/7, are our two home care partners. We're rolling out Isaac's services to all clients of both of these organizations, and are, I suppose, focusing on our value proposition then for the home care company. What is it that they want to get out of the devices? Then we're also working on projects with the HSE Digital Transformation Team and the Health Innovation Hub Ireland, which is with the Integrated Care Team down in Galway. So we're learning a lot and being able to put ourselves into their shoes throughout that process. And then obviously we've had fantastic support from the guys in D-Connect, the Connected Health and Wellbeing Cluster, and eHealth Embark. So that kind of brings me to the end of this presentation. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks for that, Lauren. That was very much to the point. And I'm just going to ask Gavin now to put his camera back on as well. And yeah, great. So we can see you as well, Gavin. And great timing as well, Lauren. Thank you. So I have a question for you, Lauren. So when you went out to the HSE, so that, you know, for a lot of people, that's the holy grail. They want to get the product into the HSE. The HSE is so vast. How did you know who to talk to, how to access them? What were your first steps?
So I suppose we had an idea that anyone that dealt with the community would be the best people for us to deal with. And someone recommended the memory technology resource rooms. So they're, I suppose, a support from the HSE for people who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia to access resources to support them. So we looked online and there's a list of every single memory technology resource room with all of their contact details. And we reached out to all of them. And we got
through LinkedIn or email, Lauren?
Email. So they all had emails and phone numbers on that list. So we got really good interaction with a couple of them and started off a free trial so that they could see the benefits. And this led to then one of the occupational therapists that we were working with was on a course with the digital transformation team. And that's what led to our project with the HSE Digital Living Labs.
Okay, so that's something that we see again and again, actually, is that you have to identify a champion. So in that case, that particular OT was a champion. And did you find then that OTs were a route to market for you?
Yes, we found that we've had really good interaction with occupational therapists. Another key area that we're looking at is public health nurses, really anyone that's based in the community. We find that when we explain Isaac to them, they can automatically tell us 10 clients that they're working with who can benefit. Then when you're looking at people maybe higher up within the HSE or in different departments, it's a different value proposition. It's reducing hospital admissions, keeping people well, increasing capacity within hospitals. So it's a very different mindset. So exactly what Gavin was saying about putting yourself into their shoes, you do really need to change your approach based on who you're speaking to.
Okay, and Gavin, can I pass that one over to you? So as I say, for many of our clients, the holy grail is getting their product into the HSE or the NHS. Do you find the champions play an important role in breaking down barriers and opening doors?
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. I'm currently doing a master's degree, on digital transformation which is run by the HSE, and I see that firsthand. Where you have a clinician who you've developed an understanding with, who really gets, because sometimes what you say in their literature, what it says on your website, it's not enough. If you're passionate about what you're doing, I really would say that there's no better way to get feedback is a clinician, who's willing to kind of go to bat for you, because ultimately any change, any new procedure, any new product takes time, effort, and learning. And what I've seen with the HSE is that it's tremendous people, completely overworked. And so you really have to have an internal, there's so much benefit having an internal champion. And they, obviously to be, you've got to put the time and effort to show them they're not backing the wrong horse, and that you're going to follow through and be there. Because what the big question is, where are you going to be in 2 years? You write some software, you give them a, fantastic piece of software, but are you going to be there in 2 years, in 5 years? So in this industry, it's, maybe it's slow and steady wins the race sometimes if you can afford to put in the time, but that is absolutely, the key to success.
Okay. And I also want to address something that you said, Gavin, around, you know, outsourcing your technology or working with the team, whether it be in-house or outsourced. This is something that we have come across as an obstacle. And again, in Deconnect, because we're a new agency, we're constantly working to our customer needs, iterating what we do. So something that we have discovered is that we either have tech founders who need to scale and don't have the business expertise, or we have non-tech founders who have a good idea about business, but they don't have the tech skills. And quite often, scaling involves perhaps applying for a grant to pay a tech team or a tech person, but then they get a product that they may not be able to maintain themselves. So I'm just going to put it out there for our attendees that we have an in-house software engineers in Sarah Demisi who can provide a no-code solution to our clients to give you a free hand. Gavin, you talked about building on white label. So what we found is a good solution is to build a no-code solution that gives you an MVP, or as you call it, Gavin, a minimum lovable product. Yeah, because what you said there about the Amazon Kindle, getting the first ugly one, if I may call it ugly, out to see, and have your customers tell you that it's ugly, because they might not think it's ugly. They might, as long as it comes out, as Lauren said, as long as it comes out of the box ready to use, they might not care what it looks like.
Yes.
So would you have anything to add there on the either one of you on next steps, how to scale a product?
And my advice is just to figure out what is differential about your product and focus your energy in hiring on the people that will make a difference. So, if it's all about making something easier to use, you need to focus on the user interface. If it's delivering, the first in class secure solution, you need to hire a good security engineer, or at least partner with a good security. So you got to focus on what really will be your selling point. And rather than, trying to hire, for all roles, really think about which ones you're going to want to build a relationship with that person to be there day in, day out working with you. If you have a big intense effort around prototyping, but once you're done, you're going to be shipping and doing customer service, maybe you outsource the entire prototyping.
Okay, and Lauren, do you have anything to add there? You talked also about how you iterated and tweaked as you went along.
Yeah, I think taking people's feedback on board, like sometimes it might have been one person would say something and we thought, okay, well, maybe that's not that important, but it was when more and more people seemed to say the same thing. So I take the feedback you get on board, even if it's just from one person, because if you're able to solve it for that one person, you're really solving it for a lot more people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. I think that we've covered everything that we wanted to cover today. So do either one of you have anything to add before we call it a day?
I think that's it for me anyway. And
can our clients contact you if they would like to discuss the iterative process in more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to reach out, I'm sure, Sarah, you could share our contact details.
Yep, that's great. And Gavin?
Absolutely. I will say that, for those who are in this space and still, ramping up on the HSE, you might find it useful to go to the eTenders website, create an account, log in. There are tenders coming up every month for the HSE, and there's an equivalent one in the UK. And when you reach those tender documents and look at what they're looking for, they're giving you for free a requirements list. So if you have a core capability and wanted to validate it, or if you wanted to go a level deeper, take the time to go to these tenders. Many of them have Excel sheets with 100 line items, and you learn a lot from what matters to them, because that's what they think they need. And you have to address that before you get a seat at the table. So I think that's a very good.
Yeah, and also a free resource.
And a free resource.
It takes a little bit of time, but yeah.
Yeah, I met a very successful entrepreneur who built a business based on reading the reviews of Amazon on Amazon.com. He looked at a product, he looked at his product category. He was doing a consumer product, not a medical product, but he just looked at what people were complaining about, and he just stack ranked them. He spent he said himself, he spent days and days reading customer reviews and then tabulating what was the key threads. And his product was going to be competitive on price, but he was going to address the top 3 complaints. And he built his business on that. And the company's called Anchor. And Stephen's built a business now with hundreds of products, including UFI, EUFY. They do vacuum cleaners and everything, but they built it on the very simple premise of tackling pain points. So if you're really wondering what to do or wondering what you're sure is right, find out where people are complaining.
Great. Okay, thanks very much for that. And so now I'm just going to invite you all to join us in a minute's silence, and then we'll wrap up for today. So I'll just start the minute silence now. Thank you, everybody. I wish you a very good day, and we'll see you again next week when we'll be talking about medical device regulation. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Lauren. Bye now.